thought I was out of the swing of this.
No, maybe. Yeah. No, not even now.
Well, it's telling me that we are. So
Yeah, well,
I'm counting on it. Hello, people.
Trust it. Now it's streaming. Now we're definitely.
Well, it's telling me that we are. So I'm counting on it.
Now we're streaming on Facebook as well. Now it's streaming. Now we're definitely. I'll be quiet. It's me. I'm talking to myself. Pop-up chat. Close that. Nobody's on Facebook, but we're there.
Well, they're not used to us doing a show. It's been too long.
Nobody's on Facebook. We're completely abandoned. All right, here they come. A few people on Facebook. YouTube is still way behind. We've got at least one.
Your show will go live in 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. Blog Talk Radio.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to Yaron and Amy show. Hey, Amy, how's it going?
It's going okay. You know, it's been so long. I was telling people that I just have forgotten how to do a show. And so you're going to have to just pick up the slack for me today, Yaron. I hope you're ready.
Bicycle. It's like riding a bicycle. It'll come back to you just like that.
Okay. I did put together some program notes.
Yeah, you put together program notes. A lot of interesting stuff. There's a ton to talk about. I thought we could spend the whole time talking about Trump in Helsinki, but I'm glad, and the whole week he's had, which has been entertaining at best, I guess. And but you put on other notes, so that's good. We can also talk about. We're also going to talk about Trump.
Well, I want to tie that in also to this theme, right? Because I have this title.
Trump has a right to be wrong. We can talk.
Well, exactly. That's the whole point, right? So who is it
that has the right to be
citizens? Wrong? Yeah, who has the right to be wrong, right? So the important thing here is at the base of rights, the whole concept of rights, which is what government is supposed to be protecting. At that base is volition, the idea that we have the right to choose how to guide our own lives within a sphere, right? So we don't have the right to be wrong in the sense of violating other people's rights, but the whole purpose of government supposedly is to protect rights, which is to give us the freedom to act by our own individual judgment, which includes the right to make bad decisions as well.
Yeah, we should be clear. The essence of rights is not the right to make bad decisions. The essence of rights is the right to be rational and pursue one's rational values. But as part of that, given that we have volition, given that we're fallible, we have the right to be wrong. And we have a right to be wrong. I think you said it, as long as we're not violating other people's rights, as long as we're not pointing a gun. Yes, and government has a different standard because they do have a gun.
Yes, they do have a gun, and moreover,
they be wrong, but there are consequences. So there should be there are consequences of everybody for being wrong. But with government, it's our responsibility to inflict those consequences on them.
Well, and also, I mean, people have forgotten this conception of government, but our government is supposed to be working on our behalf. Government is supposed to be restricted in its actions to be able to do only what is allowed, right? They're supposed to be given permission. We are supposed to have the maximum amount of freedom consistent with respecting other people's rights. And today, of course, it's the inverse. It's almost as if we as citizens have to walk around asking government for permission to do every little thing. And government seems to be relatively unfettered. And it's completely wrong.
Absolutely. It's completely the wrong way around. It's exactly the opposite vision of the Founding Fathers. The Founding Fathers' vision was government constrained, we free. And today it's government unconstrained, and we are limited in almost everything that we do. We have to ask permission.
Yeah.
Particularly,
Rand has a beautiful dramatization of this in Anthem, and talks about it explicitly there for people who are interested.
But it's a lot worse, right? But yeah.
So I agree with you, Yaron. I thought of the title, and when I think of these titles, they're always inspired by one of the stories or something. And today it was the story about the transgender woman who wanted to have her hormone prescription filled, and the CVS pharmacy, they denied it initially.
Well,
when I get inspired, sometimes I kind of put the wrong emphasis on the underlying philosophical issue. So yes, our rights include the right to be wrong, but that's not what rights are about. As you say, rights are primarily about leaving us free to act according to our own judgment and make the right decisions, hopefully, right and moral decisions.
Rights are there to free up the virtuous to live well. I mean, and this is not just an Enlightenment conception. This is an Enlightenment conception. The Enlightenment's idea is that rights are associated with virtue, and it's the virtuous person who benefits from a regime of rights, whose rights are, that we institute rights in order to protect the human mind, right, from force, and we institute rights in order to protect virtue in action, in our actions in the world. And we have to protect the unvirtuous, because the government shouldn't be in a position to decide what is virtue and what is not.
Yes, exactly. So government has to be strictly limited. We start to think that with the mission creep of government as it exists today, you start to get skeptical as to whether government can be properly limited or how we can ever do it, especially when we see some of the stuff that Trump has done this week. But anyway, so my goal is, when we go through these stories in the program notes, and again, those of you who don't know, I've got program notes over at my blog, which is don'tletitgo.com. All the stories either involve private individuals, or we've got some politicians also making what I think are some wrong decisions. And we can talk about which of them actually has the right to be wrong. But I start off with this very provocative story because it's provocative at a few different levels. And Twitter just, fed me this at the top of the news the other day. The article that I've got is from The Hill. There's a woman, a transgender woman, Hilda Hall, and apparently she has, her case has come to the attention of the American Civil Liberties Union, which has now made CVS pay attention to the case.
She is a man trying to be a woman.
Yes. So you and I could have the talk about this, right? Because I don't know if you and I have ever really discussed this issue, but I
want to discuss this issue. But I think that the fact is, at this point, since she hasn't taken the hormone and hadn't done anything,
she has now taken the hormones, as far as I know.
She's a she now, but no. I mean, my view is you have a penis, you're a man. So.
Okay. Well, we should talk. And actually, I put in the program notes for skeptical people like you. Okay. And my goal isn't to convert you and to say, okay, 100% you believe that, yes, there is a condition that exists like this, and that this is really a woman and a man.
But I don't think you get to redefine your nature because you have a psychological condition. And I think it's primarily psychological, and it has some biological manifestation, but it's primarily psychological. You don't get to redefine reality based on your psychology.
I interviewed an endocrinologist.
Yeah.
And my primary motivation for interviewing this endocrinologist was his work on Hashimoto's. So, I've got this Hashimoto's, and there's a whole bunch of junk science out there about Hashimoto's. And this guy was very rational. And then it turns out I learned that a lot of his practice has to do with giving hormone therapy to transgender patients. And I asked him, I said, there are people who are skeptical about whether this is an actual real medical condition. And he, as I said, I've seen his work in the Hashimoto's field. He's so rational and so good. He's gotten me to, change hormone therapy, or not, the thyroid hormone therapy. So I've been very impressed with him. And then he says, in this realm, he has been convinced, just working with so many patients, that there is a real condition, that once you bring in the hormones, it actually drastically improves their lives. So
I believe it, but having a condition that doesn't define whether it's a psychological condition, what the nature of that.
Well, right. So all I'm saying is,
it's a psychological condition. There's no question, but calling yourself now, after you take the hormone and after you do the surgery, fine. I have no problem calling you a woman.
Okay.
But just because you feel like a woman doesn't make you a woman. Now, if you take enough hormones, and if you you know, if you chop it off or whatever you do, sorry, I mean, I just find the thing. Then, you know, I know an economist, a very, very famous economist. I've hung out with her. You know, she used to be Donna McCluskey, and now she's Deirdre McCluskey, and I think she's in her 70s. I mean, and she did this relatively late in life. And yeah, I have no problem viewing her as a she. She's gone through all the treatment. She presents herself as a woman. Although she likes shocking people by telling them she used to be a man. But that's a different story. But you know, that's fine. But you know, go through with it. Unless you go through with it, then don't tell me if you're a man to call you a woman. That's all. And well,
whether the condition... what you're going to call them is another whole story. But really, I mean, the only thing at issue here is whether you would think it was morally proper to fill a prescription for someone who is going through this sort of hormone therapy. And let's talk about adults here too, because, you know,
I was kids. No. I'm violently against this. I think it's abuse and the fact that they're doing this to kids is horrific.
Right. I was relieved,
right?
I was a tomboy, and I'm kind of still a tomboy. So I was relieved to learn from Dr. HD when I interviewed him, and he goes anonymous. He's got this great blog. I linked to it on the program notes, that he also thought it was ill-advised to start any of this transitioning for minors. And in fact, he said there are a number of people, it's quite normal to have, I think, what do they call it? Gender dysphoria, that they could have it in a transitional way when they're young and then they grow out of it. So imagine, you know, the parents who take these kids, so, you know, and they start giving them hormone therapy and stuff before they even go through puberty. Wrong. And this doctor also agreed that was wrong. So I think responsible doctors are doing this for adults and they're identifying what they believe is a real condition. I think that we don't know enough about it to pass moral judgment is really my only point.
Yeah, I agree with that. And so the whole point about giving drugs, I mean, I think of course you give drugs. I mean, it's not your job as a pharmacist to place yourself in judgment. It's not your job as a pharmacist to be their doctor or their psychologist or their psychiatrist.
Well, okay. So I did hear from a pharmacist who was saying that it is part of a pharmacist's, you know, kind of proper role to, for instance, you know, connect with the doctor and say, hey, this drug that you're prescribing doesn't seem like it's going to do what you're saying, or there's a cross reaction with something else that the patient has. So there is some expertise that the pharmacist is supposed to be able to exercise independent judgment.
You've got due diligence to make sure a big mistake isn't happening here, but that's not the case in the CVS. It's not the case with the other story that was connected to CVS, which is a Walgreen, where they wouldn't give her an abortion drug, where they wouldn't give her an abortion drug. That's where somebody is placing their morality and dictating to somebody else how they should
well,
live.
Right. Okay. But so then this whole issue has different layers, right? So the first question is, you know, do we think that there would be something morally wrong with giving these hormones to an adult who wanted to change his or her gender? And I would say no. I don't think there's anything morally wrong with it based on...
I agree with you.
Yeah. So then the other question is, do we think it's good for a pharmacy, a company, you know, a chain of pharmacies to have a policy that allows individual pharmacists to refuse to fill a prescription for something like this or for the abortion pill or whatever, so long as, for example, it doesn't inconvenience the customer? So, you know, pharmacist A, who's some kind of religious bigot or something, says, I have a moral objection to this, and doesn't embarrass the customer, doesn't make a big deal, but just calls his colleague over and just has the colleague come and fill the prescription, not inconveniencing the customer. If you were a pharmacy chain, might you think it was good to have that sort of policy?
Yeah, I think Walgreens has that policy based on the story you sent, and it makes sense to me. It's employee friendly and it's also customer friendly. And as long as you're not inconveniencing the customer, and then I don't see.
Or embarrassing them. Oh my gosh.
You know, let's say you have a company and work at the company happens on 7 days a week, and you've got a Muslim employee and you've got a Jewish employee, and the Jewish employee doesn't want to work on Saturday and the Muslim employee doesn't work on Friday. So you coordinate schedules to take that into account. Now, right. I know I'm just waiting on YouTube and on Facebook saying, a Muslim employee, how can you have a Muslim employee, you traitor? Nobody has Muslim employees. But no, yeah, I mean, you take into account the within reason, the needs of your employees, and as long as they're not outrageous and as they're not completely destructive or so irrational as to be intolerable, then yeah, sure. But as a business, you have to place the interest of the customer. Those are important. And look, from a legal rights perspective, and I think this is the next.
Right, that's the next level, right? Yeah.
A pharmacy can say, we don't treat, should be able to say, can't say today, but should be able to say, we don't treat transgender, we don't sell abortion drugs. But
apparently in Arizona, that's the law. That's what the law allows.
Do it in Arizona.
Yeah.
I wonder when that goes to courts, whether the Supreme Court would uphold that under the.
Well, and this is what ACLU seems to be geared to start trying.
Once you don't allow it for race, what's the limit, right? So I can understand that. So you should, as we've said many times, you should be able to have a sign saying no Jews allowed. Mm-hmm. All my anti-Semitic friends on YouTube will be pleased with that. And you should be able to have racist policies, bigoted policies in a variety of different ways. Right. That those policies, in my view, are immoral. It would be immoral to have any one of those things, but you should have a right to do it. So that's immoral, but have a right to do. A business should make a business decision, and I think the correct business decision is probably to let employees have a choice as long as the customer is not being inconvenienced
or embarrassed. This woman was mortified. So yes,
and a singular. Yeah. Employee at a business should not be able to make a decision like that for the whole pharmacy. That it should be a policy of the company, not of the pharmacist.
Exactly. No, exactly. One thing that's interesting about this story is that the Hill says that CVS gave a statement to the Hill, and then the Hill quotes selectively from that statement. So you don't get the whole statement. What they do say is they say that this pharmacist who denied Hill, actually her name is Hill as well. Is that right? Hilda Hall. No, not Hill, Hall. Okay. She's Hall. They're the Hill. So when this pharmacist denied Hall the prescription, what CVS says is that sometime after that, they fired this pharmacist. But somehow, even though they supposedly, and the implication is that they fired this pharmacist over this refusal to serve and this embarrassing the customer, et cetera. Yeah. Somehow they didn't get in touch with Hall with her complaints and everything. They said it was, quote, an unintentional oversight. That just seems fantastic to me, as in unbelievable. And so what I was thinking probably is that, it just so happened that they did have to let this pharmacist go for some other reason later. Maybe they reprimanded this pharmacist at the time, but didn't let the pharmacist go right away. And then they discovered, as you would expect, because if there's somebody that treats another human being this horribly, you can expect that they're going to do it again and again and eventually get fired for something else. So I just, I question the cause and effect relationship there, right? I don't think that there was a direct cause and effect relationship between this pharmacist denying Hall the prescription and embarrassing Hall and, doing all these horrible things to her and getting fired. I'm sure ACLU is going to pick up on that too. They're full of smart attorneys. What I don't like is that they're going to take this from CVS as, some sort of excuse to try to overturn the law, because again, the law should leave this question to the free market. Absolutely. And, let these pharmacies discriminate and see what happens to them.
And that's what ACLU will do. So, and we know how the Supreme Court will rule. I mean, precedents, they have to follow precedents and precedents.
Well, I guess if they get Kavanaugh in or something, maybe not, who knows?
Yeah, Roberts is not going to go that way, but it's not clear that either conservatives, unless they're willing to relook at the Civil Rights Act, they're going to have a problem. I mean, if they want to relook at the Civil Rights Act, I'm all with you.
Gorsuch might be fairly compelling on something like that. We'll have to see.
Gorsuch and Thomas might be willing to relook at the Civil Rights Act. I'm not sure the rest will. We'll see.
Yeah.
But that would be great if they overturned that whole portion of the law. I mean, imagine if they ruled that section of the Civil Rights Act as unconstitutional. I mean, so many laws would have to get thrown out as a consequence. That would completely turn the world upside down. That would be great, but unlikely, very unlikely, unfortunately, to happen. All right, somebody's asking.
Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah, I was going to say that I have one last wrinkle, but go ahead and go for the question first.
Well, go with the wrinkle, and then between topics, I'll cover this because it's
so the last wrinkle is that you would want, because pharmacists are supposed to exercise some independent judgment when they get a prescription in their hands. They're supposed to look at, does this really make sense for the condition and things like that. And call a doctor if they see a problem. They do have some independent judgment to exercise. It makes sense for a pharmacy to have a policy like that, where they do allow the person to occasionally refuse service to a customer. Again, not if it's going to involve treating the customer badly or inconveniencing the customer, but I would actually argue that it's a good policy for a pharmacy to have, allowing them to exercise that judgment, not just for the law.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely. They have to follow their professional responsibility to advise the customer if they think they're doing something wrong, and to prohibit them, not sell them something they know is going to do harm. So it's their fiduciary responsibility. It's their fiduciary duty as a pharmacist. And I think they kind of take like the doctors take an oath. They take an oath to, so it's a fiduciary duty that's part of their profession. And I think they have to abide by it. All right, somebody's asking what the sculpture is here behind me. That one.
Cool.
And the sculpture is The Vine. It's a copy. It's a small copy of The Vine by Harriet Whitney Frischmuth, who was an exceptional American sculptor. She, early 20th century, I think the sculpture, the original dates back to 1921. If you want to see a life-size version of this, which is gorgeous, I know of two. One at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City. You can see a life-size version of the Vine. And another one at the, which one's the Cincinnati? Cincinnati is in South Ohio. In the Cincinnati Museum of Art, there's another copy of the Vine, and actually another life-size Harriet Whitney Frischmuth sculpture in the same museum. So, she was one of the great American sculptors. I think 1880 to 1980 are her dates, and you can find this. I can't remember how much I paid for it, but it's actually a particularly good reproduction. I've seen really, really, really bad ones.
Oh no.
Careful what you buy online, because there's a lot of really bad stuff online if you're going to buy them. All right. I also want to remind you, if you want to ask a question, we're using the super chat on YouTube, so you can use super chat to ask the question, ask questions. By the way, somebody's mentioning Cincinnati Art Institute. It's excellent. The Art Museum in Cincinnati is excellent. It's got some really magnificent 19th century and early 20th century American art that's phenomenal.
Another reason to go to Cleveland next year? Well,
Cincinnati's far from Cleveland, but from what I understand, probably 2-3 hour drive. From I understand is Cleveland has a beautiful and an amazing art museum as well, because these are rich 19th century industrial cities. And they had, those were the collectors who collected the good stuff. Luckily Picasso had not been painting yet. And so they bought and collected and then contributed to the museums, the really, really good stuff. And that's Cleveland, Cincinnati, and many others. Oh, they say Cincinnati is at least 4-hour drive from.
Oh, wow. Okay. So Ohio is a bigger state than I always think of.
It's a big state. All right. So you can use the super chat to ask us questions. Ideally, when you're asking the questions on Super Chat, ask them about the topic we're talking about. Somebody on Facebook asked why I haven't spoken about Putin and Trump. It's only because I was traveling this week, and I have to say, I was traveling and I was going to do a show at least on 3 occasions. I was like gearing up to do a show, and twice I was just exhausted. So I don't know what it is, but I think I'm getting old. I'm gonna work in the next few months on reversing that phenomena. But it looks like I'm getting old, and I'm just slowing down.
If you succeed in reversing that, please tell me how. I want to know. So we can skip over. We can skip over.
But don't worry, people. Amy and I are going to get to Putin, Trump. You didn't think I would have nothing to say, because what would life be like if I didn't say regularly, "Told you so," about Trump? You know, it would be boring. So. Told you so. But what was the next topic? We can take our time. We can keep them in suspense. We don't have to go to Trump right away. We'll lose half the listeners anyway when we go to Trump. So,
on the topic of the right to be wrong, I've got another one that's a little bit complex, and we can just do it, I think, fairly quickly, because at least for me, I'll see what you have to say, but I don't have a ton to say. The headline from New York Times is "What stays on Facebook and what goes? The social network cannot answer." And it's all concerned with what is Facebook's definition of hate speech that it's implementing. What is the policy behind what it allows to remain on Facebook versus what it doesn't? So, for example, talk about Holocaust deniers.
Yeah, he got into trouble with that one.
Yeah. So, do they allow Holocaust deniers? And Zuckerberg says he would not ban Holocaust denialism on Facebook because, quote, "there are things that different people get wrong," right? So he's got the idea that he's going to let people get things wrong and go ahead and allow some of that. And then apparently he later explained, this is kind of reminding me of Trump this week, right? Changing your mind a little. He later explained that there were many other ways that Holocaust deniers could be penalized by Facebook, yet lucidly remained elusive. Now, I'm just a Facebook user. I know of other ways that Holocaust deniers could get penalized by Facebook, because a lot of times these people are going to do things in very offensive ways. They're not just going to present in a bland, dispassionate way their theory of Holocaust denial. They're usually going to have a whole bunch of other stuff. They're going to get reported by users and shut down that way. There's going to be a lot of stuff that happens, right? But one question is, and who has the right to be wrong? So you could say, okay, should Facebook allow Holocaust denialism on its site? It's not necessarily that Holocaust deniers have a right to use Facebook in that way. But again, what, as a private company, would your policy be if you ran Facebook?
I mean, I think it's a really difficult question, right? Because Holocaust denial, I mean, this is how Zuckerberg got wrong. It's not just wrong. Mm-hmm. It's wrong. It's an immoral, and it's evil, and you have to be an invader. It's not, you can't be neutral about Holocaust denial any more than you can be neutral about racism, any more than you can be neutral about jihadism or a lot of these things. So you have to decide, and I don't know what I would decide. Like, I couldn't have created Facebook, so little be me to make these decisions. But are you going to say, look, speech is speech, we're going to allow everything on unless you're
inciting violence or something?
Violence. Yeah. Or you could say, we've got certain criteria, and basically here they are. We think Holocaust denial is evil. We think jihadism is evil. We think that racism is evil. Here are the list of the things we consider evil and offensive, and we will not put on Facebook, and make it clear what those things are. Certain language we won't allow spoken on Facebook. We won't allow certain points of view because they're offensive, and just put it out there and let us know. That is, so my view is that long-term, the more explicit Facebook becomes on having criteria, and then more those criteria transparent, but also make some sense to people, the better off Facebook will be long-term. I think people will leave the platform if there's too much uncertainty, if there's too much offensive stuff there, or if there's too little, or if they've made it too narrow. I think there'll be alternatives. I don't believe Facebook's a monopoly. I don't believe people can't start over somewhere else. I don't believe any of that nonsense. I believe Facebook has to have a balance here. And what that balance is their problem. It's not mine. It's a business problem. It's not a legal problem. It might be a moral problem. If they make it too narrow, certainly you would have to say, why are you lumping in capitalists with racists, right?
Sure.
capitalist or something. But there's a rational way of doing it, but it requires, I think, transparency. And
I mean, there is that legitimate option, right? Between saying, on the one hand, we'll allow anything as long as it's not inciting violence.
Yeah.
Then I think another option would be, will allow, again, the expression of any idea that isn't inciting violence, so long as it's not done in some abusive and rude way. So you would, allow basically any content, but then it would be the form of the expression that you would try to make standards around. But that's really hard. That's very,
and then it's a Nazi flag offensive there's a Confederate flag offensive, and in what context?
Exactly.
I think making it by some kind of offensive standard, again, makes it very, very subjective and difficult. So the more objective you become, either certain points of view you don't want, or certain symbols you're not going to accept, or it's a private business. You can set the criteria any way you want, but the quicker they do it, the more explicit they are, the clearer it is, the better. I think it's
but then see, the challenge that they have legally, as I understand it, is if they are explicit about this kind of thing,
then people can sue them.
People can sue them, right? Because they treat them as a, quote, publisher. Yep. And I would say, even if they say, okay, there's certain things that we're not going to allow you to publish on our site, that doesn't make them necessarily a publisher, because it's still the individual who's doing this. And so why would you not, sue the individual who posted the content versus the platform itself, right?
So the problem there is the law, not Facebook, right? The law is wrong. It strikes me.
So it's pushing Facebook in these weird directions to be vague and everything.
Yeah, and it's not clear why publishers should be treated the way they're treated, or why there's that provision about publishers, or whether that's legitimate, or whether...
Well, if you're actually a publisher, you should be able to be sued, for example, for libel.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so what you're saying is they're now curating content, therefore they're a publisher, therefore... No, that's stupid, right? Because they're not writing, and they're not doing it.
Exactly.
They're giving some criteria on what they find acceptable, what they find...
And they're either going to take the whole post, or they're not going to take the whole post. They're not editing the post.
So that problem is with the law. But I think so. You have criteria, and you say, these are points of view we find offensive and we do not want expressed on our platform. We don't allow pornography on the platform. We don't allow even nudity on the platform, as far as I know. We don't allow racism on the platform. And here's some examples of racism. And this can be borderline cases, and we'll deal with them as they come up. We don't allow, and find 5, 6, 7 things that you don't allow, and expand and shrink it based on circumstances. And the borderline cases are going to be tough, but that's life. Life sometimes throws tough stuff at you.
Sure.
And fight the battle in court that you need to fight in order to change the laws, I guess.
Now, here's the thing that I actually wonder if it's in Facebook's self-interest as a business to try to enforce community standards that go beyond the no incitement to violence and all that stuff. And here's one example, and it just comes from Zuckerberg. And Zuckerberg, when I've heard him speak, before these legal bodies of scummy politicians who are trying to, harass him, I don't know that he is always completely briefed on all of the technological details, but I heard him say this one time that they found it quite easy, for example, to keep ISIS from recruiting people off of the platform using AI, using, automated means, right? But that it's harder to use these automated means to address so-called hate speech. Yep. And that this is a big technological challenge. And to me, the fact that it's a big technological challenge, to enforce community standards against so-called hate speech, the fact that you can't do that in an automated way should be a clue to, just make you think, question your premise that it would be good to implement that sort of standard. I know that he has a very idealistic vision of the sort of connectedness that he wants to inspire on Facebook, but I just question the wisdom of it, not just in the legal climate, but because of the technology and what the technology enables, because those standards can be somewhat subjective and really hard to apply in an automated way.
It's going to get better. It's going to get much better. And then
you think he'll be able to do that? He'll be able to.
You can always have a review. I mean, again, it's not clear what the best strategy for Facebook is. from a business perspective. But I think this is the difference between me and a lot of people out there, these objectivists who claim that there's an implicit contract for them to publish whatever the hell they want on there, which is complete bonkers. It's up to Facebook to do it. And I think from a business perspective, the sooner, the clearer, the more explicit, the better it's going to be for everybody. So I'd like to see. And Zuckerberg clearly has no clue, unfortunately, because he said what he said in that statement was, when he was interviewed, I think it was, Holocaust deniers are wrong. So it's just a mistake. So we're gonna allow them to post. By implication, let's say racists, well, it can be a mistake, but what is Holocaust denial if not just a sign of racism? Mm-hmm. So but it gets tricky. I mean,
it's tricky. And I cut Zuckerberg slack. Because of the existing legal climate. He's trying to walk this line. So if he was going to be as transparent as you recommend, it might give people a credible argument that they've become a publisher.
But either way, that might be the case. But either way, I think Facebook's business model will suffer as a consequence. So he has to come up with something.
I mean, do that and fight it in court then, and try to actually make a good argument that this is not publishing. This is still curating, even if he's got a list of standards that mean that the post won't be allowed. Yeah. I guess that would be the route to go, the moral route.
Yeah, I mean, or you allow everything on, and that's fine. You can do that as well. And Holocaust deniers should be allowed on. And then you have to allow racists and you have to allow all kinds of people on that Zuckerberg clearly doesn't want to allow on. So that's the problem he has. For some reason, he's put Holocaust deniers in a different category than other people with evil ideas. So, and that I think that I think is screwed up, right? If you're gonna open it up the platform to everybody, then open it up to everybody. If you're gonna have it closed, then define exactly how it's closed and let everybody know in what way it's closed. Now, the problem is, as you said, there's a legal issue. There are all kind of cultural issues. There's the technology issue. There are a lot of issues which are making this difficult for him. And, I don't care that much. Some people get really riled up about this stuff. I don't care that much because it's a business issue. And if you don't like Facebook, leave it. It's very simple. Just leave it. And if you think Zuckerberg violated a contract, sue him. I mean, maybe you're right. Maybe there was an implicit contract. Go to court. Prove it.
Yeah, and that's what I've been advising people to do. That's what I've been advising people to do. Yeah.
I doubt anybody's going to win that one because there's no implicit contract there.
Yep. Okay, so let's get into Trump because we know. I mean, they're waiting for us to talk about Trump, but let's do it in.
Told I'm wrong about Trump because Trump wants complete free trade. Next I'm going to hear he wants private banking with no Federal Reserve. He wants a strong America and the defeat of authoritarianism all over the world. And he's playing 4D chess. And me and you, we're just not smart enough to get it.
Yeah. I mean, we have these moral principles and stuff that we actually apply. And we think that when he says things and when he meets with thuggish dictators, that means something. I mean, how can we think that means something?
Lying is a 4D chess game. I mean, you lie in order to strategically position yourself to get in a better position, and meeting with dictators is a good thing. We are told everybody does it. And hey, what's the alternative? It's either meeting with dictators or having a nuclear war.
Sure, that's the only two
alternatives that exist, because Obama didn't meet with the North Korean dictator, and we had we didn't have a nuclear war, and Bush didn't meet with him, and we didn't have a nuclear war. And
but see, he didn't have the capability yet, but now he's got the capability.
He had them under Obama. But anyway, it's stupid. I mean, so let's get to the actually. Yaron and Amy don't lie. We don't. Somebody said, you haven't lied. And we certainly don't lie in public when everybody will catch us. But we don't lie generally because it's not about being caught. It's about having integrity. And it's about being honest. It's about respecting your own mind and respecting your own life and respecting your own
connection to reality. Yeah, we got to
pride requires that you not lie because you pride is about striving for more perfection. And so no, I don't lie. And again, I'm not even president of the United States, and I don't like. I mean, God. Anyway, but let's talk about Putin and Trump. Wow. I mean, I even saw people who like Trump's supporters, like, go, whoa, this is nuts. This guy's insane. I think anybody who loves America and loves what America stands for, at least, and knows anything about Russia. Now, I know I've got my Russian friends out there who love Putin, but Putin's a authoritarian thug. He's now. They tell me that the Russian people need that. Russian people need a thug.
Wow.
That's what they need. That's what I'm told. I have more respect for the Russian people than I think Russians do. So I have more respect for people, period.
So Russian people, they shouldn't have the right to be wrong. They should have an authoritarian, always forcing them to do the right thing all the time.
They want one. They want one. That's why they keep voting him in. That's why they love him. That's why he gets respect. They want one. So in what is the biggest thing that has turned people's view of Trump around? It's because he publicly questioned and actually denied the conclusions of our intelligence community in this meeting with Putin, or in the press conference. No, one word wrong. Amy, really, you're buying into that leftist media propaganda. He explained it this week that he said would instead of wouldn't, and it was just a confusion, and it was a double negative, and it just came out wrong. But yeah, I mean, that's basically what it was.
I mean, that's the biggest thing, right? And this is a terrible thing for an American president to do on
foreign soil.
Where's top cover? Where's top cover, huh?
Standing next to a foreign leader who is clearly antagonistic to U.S. interests, clearly acting against our interest, to embrace him, to protect him, to defend him. And in that occasion, even if you think it, to explicitly say that you don't agree with your own intelligence organization's conclusions, intelligence organizations that are now led by people you have appointed. So it's not even, you can say, oh, these are all deep state appointees by Obama. You've appointed these guys. Dan Coates, the head of the security agencies, is a Trump appointee. The head of the CIA is a Trump appointee. The previous head of the CIA was Mike Pompeo, who is now Secretary of State. The head of the FBI you appointed because you fired Comey. So here you are saying your own people out there, and you don't agree with their conclusions, and that you prefer a thug, a manipulator, a authoritarian, a man who has expressed contempt for the United States of America, has expressed an interest in reestablishing the Soviet empire, and has acted in ways that are antagonistic to U.S. interests all over the world. You're taking his side?
Publicly, out there in a press conference. So
here's somebody with $50. Thank you. I think it's Mark. Thank you, Yaron and ARI and Amy, for speaking out so consistently and strongly against Trump when some other objectivists are depressingly cheering him on. Well, I mean, what option do we have?
I mean, this is the thing. He is our president, and he's clearly doing some wrong things. I don't know that I would go as far as, for example, I've got this Washington Post article in the program notes, 4 reasons we've reached a tipping point on Trump, basically a calling for impeachment. Well, I could ask you that question.
That is written by a Republican. She's I think Jennifer Rubin is a well-known kind of on the right, foreign policy, particularly, I think she's been involved in, but this is not a left nut saying this. This is somebody on the right. And I think McCain called what he said treasonous. I'm no fan of McCain. I hate McCain.
Sure.
I think it's awful. But it just shows you the only Republicans, even some of his allies came out with statements saying, this is ridiculous what he's saying. And it's not just what he said. It's how he said it. When he talks about our intelligence, he looks contemptuous. I mean, this is not Donald Trump could not play two-dimensional chess. There is no way for him to play 3 or 4-dimensional chess. The man is not intelligent enough, and the man is so transparent in terms of how he talks and his emotions and how he reflects those. So he talks contemptuously about the intelligence agencies. And then when he's talking about Putin, full of respect. Now, notice, this is not out of character. Mm-hmm. You know, you guys can deny this, but the fact is that during the campaign, early in the campaign, he was on, and I forget the exact show, but there's video of it online that has been undoctored because I watched it originally. And he's asked about Putin, and the reporter says Putin poisons, you know, reporters, and he poisons people who disagree with you. And Trump's response to that was, we kill people too. That was his response. We kill people too. So we're taking a dictator, an authoritarian who's killing dissenters.
Yep.
And you're saying
or
America
kills, or anybody else. Yeah.
By the way, what the left always says, that's kind of a line out of Noam Chomsky. That really is a radical, I hate the word, that is an extreme leftist, a consistently leftist position in terms of American history. Well, you know, Muslims are angry with us because we killed them. That's a leftist position. The Russians are angry, you know, and then moral equivalency. You remember when Obama went to Cairo early in his presidency and gave that speech, which was basically moral equivalency between Israel and the Palestinians, between America and the Muslim world, between the good guys and the bad guys. He did this, and everybody flipped out, as did I, and condemned him and condemned him. And basically what Trump is doing is moral equivalency between Russia and between Putin and the American system, between the Russian system and the American system. You know, somebody says you can't equate Iran to Russia. I don't equate Iran to Russia. Russia is right now far more dangerous than Iran. It has tons of nukes. It is helping the Iranians. I don't consider Russia, though, an enemy. I do consider Iran an enemy, but I don't consider them a friend. So you have to know how to treat somebody who's not your friend and is not your enemy. How do you treat them? And actually, I don't know. Given what Russia's done with the elections, and given if they didn't hack they do organizationally.
What about the stuff they've done in the oil industry too, which I haven't delved too much in, but there's actual evidence that they have done things to undermine our energy industry as well.
I don't know what that. I don't know enough about it, but you know, the Chinese are hacking as well. There's a lot of hacking, but they hacked the government, or in a sense, the government, right? Which is an act of war in my view. So when China hacks the government, it should be viewed as an act of war, and the United States should take all measures to combat that. When Russia hacks the election, a server of the Democratic Party, when Russia kills somebody on English soil and English people die, and assuming we're NATO and they're allies, that's an act of war. So Russia is engaged in acts of war with the United States. So it should be dealt with. Now, I don't believe you launch nuclear weapons as a consequence.
But you don't go meet with the guy and you don't go take sides with him over your own intelligence community. You know, I worked at the Air Force Academy, and one thing that you learn in the military is they have this concept of top cover, right? So your supervisor is supposed to, unless you do something, you know, truly awful or whatever, have your back, right? And here he is, president of the United States. You've got the intelligence communities. As far as we know, they haven't done anything egregiously wrong at all in drawing these conclusions that the Russians were trying to interfere with our election. Whether they actually had an effect in that regard is another question, but it is clear that they've tried.
Yep.
And for him to, go and take Putin's side against and publicly. So then a lot of people have been saying, Yaron, in answer to this, that, Putin knows that Trump's actions speak louder than words, that all these words don't mean anything. And it's only Trump's actions, like in Syria, where we're supposedly kicking their butt or something.
We launched 50 missiles into the desert. We did nothing in Syria. The idea that we somehow holding the Russians back in Syria is absurd and pathetic. Basically, the Russians have won in Syria. Assad has won. They're cleaning up the last, people in the South and the Southwest. Israel is the one that's in real trouble because Iran is sending troops to the Golan Heights, and Israel is bombing them regularly. You don't hear that in the news as much, but regularly inside Syria to try to prevent the Iranians from coming. But they keep coming because the Russians and the Syrians are letting them. And Israel is trying to play nice with the Russians because it's trying to get them to stop letting the Iranians in. But Russia doesn't pay any attention to Israel. It doesn't pay any attention to the United States. It has its own objectives, and its objectives have nothing to do with the well-being of freedom-loving people. Putin is an enemy and should be regarded as an enemy. We should have instead of tariffs on China, we should have an embargo on Russia until it hands over the people who use the poison to kill people in the UK. Until we should have our ambassador come home from Moscow. We should have the embassy cleared out. We should treat them as the bad guys. But of course, we don't do that with anybody. We don't do it with the Saudis. We barely did it with the Iranians. But that's a proper foreign policy. A proper foreign policy doesn't play games. A proper foreign policy, you don't play 3D chess. A proper foreign policy, you don't pretend to like somebody if you hate him. A proper foreign policy, you make clear the moral status of Putin, the moral status of the Russian government, and you treat them in accordance to that moral status. Trump here is no better than Obama. They are both appeasers and moral equivocators.
Equivocators, yes.
Yeah, okay, that's the right word. Moral equivocators, and you should treat them no different. Trump and Obama are the same on foreign policy. They're both, at this point, anti-American. The fundamental characteristic of Obama when he was first elected, I said it was the first American president who was anti-American. Now I think we have the second.
But I mean, Trump is doing even more. So right now he's inviting Putin to Washington, yes, apparently.
Yes.
And
he didn't let anybody know.
Well, and he's doing this on the heels of, not only did he have this press conference where he denounced, in effect, our own intelligence agencies, he had a private meeting. And this is one of the other questions to kind of ponder here. He had this private meeting, and the only other American who was present at that meeting was an interpreter. And the big question now is, should this interpreter be forced to testify? Because we have the rest of our, branches of government not even knowing, and our own intelligence agencies not even knowing what went on in that meeting, and they're concerned that Trump may have compromised United States interests in that meeting, and they want to have this interpreter testify. I mean, imagine being the interpreter and being put in that sort of position. But What is he doing having this private meeting and then inviting Putin to come here? What do you think of those things?
Well, I think it's ridiculous. I think you should have no relationship with Putin. We should have no relationship with Russia. Somebody saying the argument of Trump supporters is that Trump is avoiding nuclear war. That is just a fantasy. That is absolutely ridiculous. The idea that the Russians want a nuclear war. They don't even want a conventional war. They'd get their asses whipped. We are so much stronger than the Russian forces. We're so much stronger than any of them. There's no war that you're attempting to avoid. This is just another sign of American weakness and capitulation. David writes, we killed 200 Russian contractors in Syria. The reason we killed them was that they were attacking a U.S. base. We were not on the offensive. We were on the defense. Mm-hmm. And they brought in air supports and they killed the 200 Russian contractors. But that was an act of defense. It wasn't an act of policy or some kind of act of
and then
strategy on the part of the Americans.
Wasn't it Mattis after he said, something like, well, we didn't really know whether they were involved or we were surprised, or he tried to downplay the Russian involvement.
Apologize to the Russians. Yeah, they apologized to the Russians about it. So no, it's not a sign of strength. Nothing, zero of anything that Trump has done in Syria suggests strength. Now, granted, I don't believe the U.S. should have done anything in Syria, but I mean, there are other places in the world that need to be dealt with, but nothing, zero, that he has done in Syria has any positive value. It's all negative. Okay, we've got David saying, chess is about sacrifice. Playing 4D chess would mean sacrificing at all level. I think it fits. No, because it's sacrificing for a purpose. Sacrifice is the wrong word, but let's take it for the way you're using it. Sacrifice is for what? what is the purpose? What's the end goal? What are you going to achieve by demeaning the United States, by demeaning the presidency, by demeaning this country?
There was
equivalency with North Korea and Russia. The only thing you're going to achieve is you're going to achieve authoritarianism in America. You're going to make people accept this kind of authoritarianism as natural, as American, as pro-American, because Trump did it, and he wants to make America great. So authoritarianism must be pro-America because everything Trump does is good. No, there cannot be. There is no way you can justify any of these actions by Trump other than that he is incompetent, and he is a moron, and he has a wrong view of what America is and its relationship to the world. Now, the other thing is he said some true things during this trip, and that's, people are missing. But he said it accidentally. Everything he does is random and accidental because he cannot play 1D chess. He cannot think linearly, never mind in multiple dimensions. But what he said a number of things that were pretty good. He went after May for the stupid deal around Brexit, which he should have been much stronger about, and he shouldn't have folded once it went public. He should have told May that if you're going to do a Brexit, do it right. What you're doing with the current Brexit is actually going to get the worst of all worlds. Mm-hmm. England's going to be independent without the benefits of the European Union, but at all the costs of the European Union, because all the regulations and all the controls and all the labor laws are going to be imposed on Britain as part of this so-called soft Brexit. He could have said that, but instead he condemned her in a kind of a silly, offhanded way and then backtracked from it. And then he went after Merkel and the European Union for not paying enough, although he went after Merkel for all kinds of reasons, but for not paying enough for NATO. Now, I agree with that, but I'm more radical than Trump. Trump is a wimp here. The real position should be the United States should get out of NATO. Unless we decide that Russia is really the enemy or a enemy, and then we want allies, and then we create this alliance that deal with Russia. But then you have to be explicit. You can't have it both ways. If you're in NATO, then who's the enemy? And the Islamists don't need NATO to fight, and the only credible enemy would be Russia. So then you have to make the case that Russia is truly an enemy.
And he was also good on criticizing Merkel about there was a pipeline deal with Russia
No. Yes, that's right. He said that Germany is a puppet of Russia, which is just a deflection of the fact that he is acting like the puppet of Russia. Right. So he's deflecting. And so the fact that he was condemning Europe for not paying enough for NATO, I think is absolutely justified. They don't. Indeed, I think the United States should leave NATO. I think NATO should fend for itself. It's rich enough. It can buy the military equipment. They could defeat Russia easily. If Russia was a real threat, the United States doesn't need to get involved.
Maybe a phase-out period, given that this has been in place for so long? Okay.
4 years. 4 years is good, because then you don't have to count on another administration. 4-year phase out of NATO from Europe. Let them restructure their economies to deal with buying military goods. They don't have to create industries because they can buy it from us or from the Israelis. Mm-hmm. Or some of them have military industries, but they should, they should do it. So, so he said some true things, but again, accidentally. Mm-hmm. And that's part of the problem. Here's another question. U.S. interfered with Russia election for years, and Cuba's in the 60s, and probably other communist countries. Election propaganda is nothing new. So why shouldn't we write it off? We know exactly what it is.
But you were citing in particular the hacking into the DNC computers, which is different than spreading propaganda.
So I have no problem with propaganda. I think that if it's state-run propaganda, then the U.S. government should label it as such. Its intelligence services should find it and label it as such. But again, there is moral equivalency here, which is unjustifiable. Just because we did something in the Soviet Union under communism does not justify Russia doing it to a free America.
Yes.
And this goes to Ayn Rand's point. A country that is ruled by a dictator has no legitimacy. It has no sovereignty. There is no legal restrictions on what can be done in that country. So for foreigner. So Ayn Rand said the United States could invade any dictatorship. It just shouldn't, because it's not its self-interest to invade any dictatorship, but the dictatorship doesn't have a right. Dictatorships don't have rights. So the United States has a right to interfere in dictatorships' countries. I'm not sure why it would, for the most part. I don't think it's the role of government necessarily to do, but it has a right to do so. Russia does not have a right to intervene in our election as long as we're a free country. So there are clear differences. There's no moral equivalency between the United States and every other country in the world that is not free. You have to take those considerations into account. Now, granted that, I don't think propaganda is a big deal. I think it should be labeled as propaganda and dismissed, but hacking into a computer, hacking into government computers, hacking into the mechanisms of the elections, that is all an act of war.
Yes, definitely. Now, what do you think about this invitation, right? So should politicians stop him from inviting? I understand that there was an offer that Trump had made to turn somebody over for questioning to Putin, and that the Senate rebuked him 98-0 or something, which is excellent.
That would have been treasonous.
Yeah.
That would have been.
So we need the Senate to stop him from doing this kind of stuff.
Unbelievable. He should have been impeached on. The fact that he would negotiate that deal. The Russians think these people, so we're going to send them to Russia, as if, again, the moral equivalency of what our government says, our intelligence services say, and remember what the issue there with the Russians is. It's an American businessman who's done business in Russia, who's been persecuted in Russia for his business activities. As far as I can tell, as far as anybody that I know can tell, he did nothing wrong except piss off Putin. And he lives in the United States under the fear of death because he's convinced that Russia is sending agents to try to kill him. That's Bill Browder. He's a very wealthy hedge fund guy in, I think, New York City. Right. And the fact that compared to Russian intelligence officers trying to hack into the US elections, comparing those two, treating them as moral equivalent. One is a commercial dispute. Maybe there's fraud, maybe it's even criminal, but it's criminal economic. The other is, intelligence officers. The government is running this. Your government, Putin, is running this, and you want to equate that with Bill Browder. I mean, that is nuts. I hate. See, WP says I hate Russia. I wonder if you've ever been to Russia. I wonder how much you know about Russia. I don't hate Russia. I've been to Russia. It's just so bizarre to me that because I get passionate and because I have a lot of facts at my disposal and because these facts all line up on one side, that automatically I'm dismissed. Maybe I shouldn't be passionate. Maybe I should be like this. And if I said it in this tone and I never got excited and I just said, this is what Russia is, maybe people would think, oh, then it must be factual.
Perhaps. Yeah. You're not supposed to have passion about the truth. That's all there is.
So there are three things Trump has done right. Only somebody's challenging me. Three things. Deregulation, which I think is mostly his underlings, not him. Luckily, I don't think he's involved. To the extent that he would be involved, we would not get deregulation. And it's much smaller than what people think. So, but it's there. Deregulation, that's good. Second.
Yeah, but what about he keeps going after the merger of AT&T and Time Warner? So there's your counterexample, your big counterexample. Your tax dollars at work continuing to prevent that merger.
There's deregulation going on. So there's no question about that. The businesses are less regulated under Trump. The regulatory agencies are less emboldened to go after people. There's less aggressiveness under Trump. And that's because people like Pruitt and people who's left now, but the people he's put in charge of these agencies are more inclined towards free markets and are leaving them alone. That's not true of the Justice Department with antitrust. It's not true of the FCC with antitrust. They're going to go after some other mergers here soon. And it's not true of Mnuchin in the Treasury. He is not pro-deregulation, but it's true of many others. So that's one. Second, corporate income tax, cutting corporate income tax, good thing. I believe, and here's heresy, I believe even Hillary Clinton would have passed a cut in the corporate income tax.
Sure. I
mean, you heard it here, but that's my belief because it was a big Democratic agenda item before the election. Three, what he did well probably is the appointment of Gorsuch. I think of all the candidates there, Gorsuch was probably the best one could think of.
I was really impressed with that dissent in Carpenter.
Those three, I think, are the only three good things that Trump has done. You can mention a few others, but those are only three major ones. On the other hand, government spending is out of control. The government deficit is growing as fast as it grew when we had the stimulus package under Obama. He's spending more money than Obama on an ongoing basis. So government spending, therefore government size, is out of control. Certain agencies are increasing regulations. His foreign policy is an utter disaster. Okay, here's the fourth thing he did okay, which is move the embassy again. Other than that, his foreign policy is a disaster. And wait until his peace plan for the Israeli-Palestinian conflict comes out. I think people will be surprised how bad it is. Everything else he does, and the fact that he's president.
Well, and then how about this? The tariffs.
And then the tariffs. The tariffs are just unbelievable. So let's go to this other issue that came out. So one, going back to this inviting Putin, right? Mm-hmm. He announces this. He doesn't tell anybody, or anybody.
Of course not.
You think should know. Like Dan Coates. Now, Dan Coates is the director of the National Intelligence. So he is the guy who coordinates all the national intelligence, the NSA, the CIA, I think FBI is dotted line to him. All the intelligence agencies, in a sense, report to him. Even military intelligence has a dotted line to him. So he is the guy that coordinates all the intelligence efforts of the U.S. government. This guy's on television, right, in a morning show, talking about, I guess, Trump, Putin, but other stuff. And then she says, there's breaking news. And he goes, what is it? Trump tweeted. And he goes, what is it? Trump's invited Putin to the White House. And this guy goes, oh my God. And he goes, well, this will be interesting. You could see how, and of course, what's the White House response? The White House response is, Coates has gone rogue. Coates is a Trump appointee, not somebody else's appointee, a Trump appointee.
It's unbelievable. It really is. And
so this is the kind of insanity of now inviting this guy again. More moral equivalency.
It's worse though, right? So it's one thing to say, okay, I'm going to meet him in Helsinki, but then to bring him here.
Yes, no, it's moral equivalency. It's treating him as a friend, as an ally, as a positive force in the world, as somebody we should sit down and interact with and negotiate and have a good time. And at the same time, he's denouncing the Germans and the British. Now, to some extent, I agree with that denunciation. But remember, they're our friends. They really are friends. They're the people who, if there was a war, they would fight with us. They're the ones who sent troops to Iraq, as bad, as stupid as that war was, and to Afghanistan. They're the people who rally on our side when things go bad because they're our friends. Putin is not our friend yet. Wow.
Well, so then this raises the question, do you think that he did compromise U.S. interests in that private meeting? Do you think that there's...
Let me just address one thing. I don't know what he did. Let's just address this. Get off this Clinton being president shit. She's not president. If she was president, we would be criticizing Hillary Clinton. And if Trump's president, we're going to criticize Donald Trump. This is not a compare and contrast your whole life. When somebody does something bad, you criticize him. You don't say, but there's somebody else would have been worse. Sure, I can think if Hitler would have been elected, he would have been a lot worse than Trump. But that's not what's relevant. We have a president. His name is Donald Trump, and he is an unmitigated disaster.
Even if I had voted for Trump, I would still be doing this.
And in my view, he is certainly worse than Bush. He is likely worse than Obama, and he might be worse than what Hillary Clinton would have been if you take everything he is doing into account. And if you take into account the way he is positioning the presidency of the United States into the future. Now, I say that with some, because I hated Obama. Obama was a horrible, terrible, unbelievably awful president, but so is Trump. So is Trump. He's at least as bad as Obama, potentially worse in terms of the long-term damage he is going to do to this country. And part of that damage is bringing Putin to the White House, which, Obama did with the Muslim Brotherhood. Obama did similar things. The difference is this. There were lots of people criticizing him when he did that on the right, on what I consider the better people. Now, everybody's falling all over the place to try to justify Trump, including you guys, some of you guys. So that, I think, is what makes him worse, because he's doing these things. He's making this moral equivalency from the right, from where we usually think of as loving America, being pro-America, standing up for America, not having this moral equivalency type things.
Right.
I don't know if he would have been worse than Hillary Clinton, but he certainly might be worse than Hillary Clinton. I don't think it's a slam dunk.
Well, the thing is that with Hillary Clinton, if she had done some of the same things, then people would not see part of it as a pro-American agenda. Right. But he's putting this under pro-American. Some people say he's a real capitalist. Some people even say he's an Ayn Rand hero. Yep. And that's the sort of association that I think makes this more dangerous in the long term.
Yeah, so let's go to tariffs. So his tariffs, which is a irrational, anti-American program meant to raise taxes on Americans and destroy American businesses. That is a net effect of tariffs.
Can I tell you the one story that has made me question, and I think should make any Trump supporter question the rationale? I already knew that tariffs were bad for us, but there are a number of Trump supporters who say he's doing this to protect us against the unfair actions of China, or he's doing this in order to preserve our security capabilities around steel and other necessary
automobiles,
automobiles, sure.
From a national security perspective.
Right. So did you see this story about the Trump, in the White House pressuring lawmakers to give China a pass with regard to the ZTE stuff, right? Now, China, that company, ZTE, actually violated security or national security related sanctions that we had imposed, right? So this company, we should not be doing business with them because they were, for instance, doing things to help Iran, right?
Yep.
And somehow Trump pressured Congress, and Congress went along. They're going to give China a pass on this. And this says to me that when Trump tells you that he's doing these so-called, these economic things for so-called security reasons, I don't believe him at all, because here is something in the economic realm that directly relates to our security. We have this company that is infringing and violating the sanction policies, and we're going to give them a pass.
Well, and this is the thing. No, none of this is national security. That is the way in which a president can impose tariffs unilaterally is by using national security as an excuse, but it is nothing but an excuse. And look, if you care about the theft of intellectual property by the Chinese, which I care about, then ban the products where intellectual property theft was used. You don't put tariffs on stolen goods. You don't allow them to be sold. You don't allow them to enter your territory. You prosecute the people who are trafficking in the stolen goods. But that's not what Trump is doing, because Trump doesn't care one iota about IP. He doesn't care one iota about any of these things. He is a mercantilist. He has the knowledge of economic of a 3-year-old. And you see it in his tweets. He writes about, we're losing to Canada, we're losing to Germany, because we had a trade deficit with him, which is unbelievably economically illiterate. Now, this is the other excuse people are giving. What Trump really wants, and he said this once in Canada, he really wants zero tariffs and zero subsidies. Mm-hmm. And this is the way he's going to manipulate people if he wants to get there. So let me give you an example. So this is so wrong on so many different levels. First of all, his advisor on these issues, now I forget his name, the University of Irvine economics professor, is not a free trader, even if nobody manipulates their stuff, right? So he just doesn't believe in free trade. Two, there's no indication of that. So he says in bilateral trade agreements that lower tariffs to zero. So what was fascinating is this last week, a really important thing happened, which was a free trade deal between Japan and the European Union.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And it's a really, really pretty good deal, right? It's a really, really pretty good deal. It's a good deal. It lowers tariffs almost to zero on trade between Japan and Europe. Beautiful. Now, it has some bad aspects to it in that it imposes like automobile regulations, European automobile regulations on the Japanese. But the Japanese are willing to take it, and they couldn't sell the cars in Europe anyway, if not abiding by those. So, but it lowers the tariffs to basically zero between Japan and Europe, which is going to be great for the Japanese economy and the European economy. If Trump believes in that, why didn't he compliment the Japanese and the Europeans? Why didn't he join the deal? Why isn't he cutting a deal with the Japanese to do something similar between the United States and Japan? Why isn't that the direction in which he's trying to move NAFTA, where he's trying to move NAFTA towards less trade and more tariffs, not lower trade? Why isn't he actually acting in a way that would promote zero tariffs? Because he doesn't believe in it. He never believed in it. He got whispered, my guess is Kudlow whispered in his ear, zero tariffs would be good. And he said it without thinking about what it actually meant. He is an economic nationalist, taking after Bannon. An economic nationalist don't believe in trade. They think foreign trade is a bad thing. They think you really
and then, like I said, he is going to give that Chinese company a pass when it does directly affect our national security. So this is pragmatism. There is not a principle, an actual pro-American principle behind what he does. I think his actions over time continue to demonstrate that. So here's the question. So we're going to go back to the title. To what extent does Trump have the right to be wrong? I mean, we're seeing that he's wrong about so many things. The Washington Post, again, that piece is suggesting impeachment, which would say, look, he is acting beyond the scope of what any president should be allowed to do. What are your thoughts?
I mean, I'm all for impeachment. I'd rather have Mike Pence, I guess, as president than Trump. I'm not a huge Pence fan, but I think he's sane. And so I would rather have Pence. I just worry about what Congress views as an impeachable crime, if you will, or impeachable. You've frozen there, Amy. Are you?
I'm here. No,
it's okay.
Yeah, I mean, I see you, but
okay, your video is freezing on my side and it's freezing on Facebook. Okay, it's better now. So I worry about Congress, extending the impeachment to, but they did that. Republicans did that over the Monica Lewinsky thing. I didn't think that was an impeachable offense. I thought there were lots of other things that Bill Clinton. I mean, in my view, every president since Coolidge should have been impeached. FDR should have been impeached for stacking the Supreme Court and for passing the securities regulations, and Congress should have been impeached itself, and many, many times. And so I don't know. As I said, I think he's really bad, and maybe he should be impeached more than others. But I think it's very difficult to make the argument of when to impeach a president. They have a right to be wrong, and we have a right to elect them out of office. I just hope, and I think my hope will not be fulfilled.
Well, and this is a question to what extent does he have the right to be wrong, right? So government is our servant, and its actions should be limited within a certain realm. I'm being told by my computer my internet connection is unstable, so I don't know if you're hearing me.
Internet connection is very your voice now is breaking up a little bit. I know. So we'll see how long this. We'll see if you can stay on. But well, yes. I mean, of course you're right, but by that standard, everybody should be impeached, right? I mean, they should all be impeached. The Supreme Court should be impeached. I mean, are you there, Amy?
Yeah, I'm here.
You there, Amy?
I'm here. Yes. Okay. No.
Okay, you are there. Yeah, I can hear you. So by that standard, by the standard of individual rights, they're all illegitimate. But it's you might want to turn off video for a while and just do audio, and that way.
Okay, that's strange.
Yeah, it is strange. You must have some kind of outage around.
Okay, I stopped the video.
Okay, the sound is much better now, so I think you're clear sound-wise.
You've got that great picture.
So I agree with you. I agree with you that I will. Let me just add a couple of things about Trump this week. One is he's lambasting the Europeans and the Chinese for manipulating their currency, which is funny if it wasn't the United States president arguing this. So what has happened is the dollar has gone up relative to these other currencies. And why has the dollar gone up relative to the other currencies? Because that is a byproduct of two things. One, having a strong US economy. When you have a strong economy, your currency usually goes up in value, all else held constant, because everybody wants to invest in your country, and therefore they buy dollars to invest in your country, and therefore the currency value of the currency goes up. So is he complaining about the fact that the US economy is doing well? And then on top of that, the Federal Reserve is raising interest rates. Raising interest rates will, everything else held constant, raise the value of your currency.
Right.
So it's not that China and the European Union have lowered the value of their currency. It's that because of our policies, we are increasing the value of our currency. So why are you blaming the Chinese and Europeans? Again, he has the economic education of a 3-year-old. He has the economic understanding of a 3-year-old, and the people advising him are idiots. And he has no clue when he talks about economics. He has no clue. And this, you can't talk about 4D chess because there's no 4D chess here. This is just wrong, right? This is just wrong. The economy is doing well because you cut corporate income taxes, because deregulation is gone. How long it will keep doing well, we will see. But the economy is doing well because those two things, and that has driven up the dollar. And now he's complaining about the fact that the dollar is expensive relative, because all prices are relative to the yuan and the euro. And the problem with that is you can raise tariffs all you want, but if the value of your currency goes up at the same time, and the value of other people's currency goes down, then the tariffs don't matter anymore.
You're still going to have the deficit. Yes.
No, because if your currency can buy more stuff, then the tax is paid for by the rise.
Oh, okay. I get it. Sorry.
So the Chinese goods are not going up in price. They're staying just as cheap in dollar terms. And you can raise the tariffs all you want. If the dollar keeps going up, then the deficit will stay exactly the same, and Americans will keep buying Chinese goods.
Right. Okay. So that's what I meant. I meant that we're still going to have the deficit.
Exactly. And it'll be exactly the same. So think about this, exactly how this works. It undermines his efforts with regard to tariffs, but it's the good U.S. economy that's generating that. Now, of course, he realizes some of that because he has some advisors who know a little bit about how the economy works. And therefore, he went out to the Federal Reserve this week as well. He's tweeting all over the place about how the Federal Reserve needs to stop raising interest rates because that'll damage his good economy. Now, I'm going to put aside whether that's true or not, because the whole question of the Federal Reserve and interest rates is a very difficult question, a very deeply difficult in economics question.
I mean, what we do know is that they're artificially setting a price. And
either way,
that this never works well, right?
That's right. But this is the point. The Fed is supposed to be, it's never really been, but it's supposed to be independent of politics. Mm-hmm. If Trump gets to the point where he's explicitly manipulating the Fed, that is a terrible president.
Well, and so this is the thing, right? So I saw a headline about this saying Trump is behaving in a way that is unprecedented for a president.
That's not exactly.
So that's not exactly true. Okay.
No, other presidents have done the same thing. Just he does it in a more explicit way. So all presidents try to manipulate the Federal Reserve. All of them.
Okay.
Some of them do it in private, and some of it but Trump does it in public. Others have also done it in public. And look, Nixon did it. Jimmy Carter did it. Every single president. It's not a president who has not done it to some extent. George Bush did it several times.
So your view is that all these things that he's done wrong are not contrary to a lot of the headlines that I see, New York Times, other places. They're not so unprecedented that you could say there's a clear case for impeachment here where there wasn't a case for impeachment with prior presidents.
No, all this is
even
wrong.
All this stuff with Putin and inviting Putin here and potentially having a private meeting and compromising our interests and stuff. All this is stuff that other presidents have done. And,
yes, Nixon went to China. They met with dictators. I don't think even Nixon should have met with Gorbachev. Never mind. But FDR. Think about what FDR did. He carved out half of Europe and gave it to Stalin.
Right.
I mean, I can't think of a bigger betrayal of the principles of freedom and liberty than what FDR did in World War II by giving Stalin half of Europe. So, yeah, it's.
Within the realm that he's in, he has the right to be wrong, and we have the right to criticize him.
Absolutely, and you know, not just the right to criticize him. I think you have to criticize him. He's the president of the United States. He's not just just somebody. He's the president of the United States, and the president of the United States is, you know, is bad. Should be held accountable. There was a theory out there that the Fed will go negative interest rates this year. I don't see how the Fed's going to go negative interest rates this year.
They've been raising them now, right?
Yeah. I think they'll raise another 2 times, and I think we'll have a recession next year. And then you know, if there's a recession between now and the midterm and the 2020 elections, then you guys who think Trump is responsible for this magnificent economy will have to take responsibility for the bad economy when it happens. Just like I hope you admitting that Trump is responsible for the mediocre stock market, just like he was responsible for the excellent stock market. If you want to give the president credit for everything, then you should give him credit for everything.
Right.
All right. So, anyway, that's enough Trump.
Yeah. So I've got in the program notes a couple of fun and positive things towards the end of them. So go to don'tletitgo.com if you want to see those. One, a study claims that attending a concert once every 2 weeks can add 9 years to your life. Now, I don't know if it can actually...
Stupid study. I have to say this. All right. So you have to read this stuff, right? Because we have to...
No, I agree. These studies are nothing.
Yeah. I'm going to read the sentence. According to the study, there's a positive correlation between regularity of gig attendance and well-being. All right? I can believe that. Fine. Sure. Then it says, and additional scholarly research, that is other studies, directly link high levels of well-being with lifespan increase of 9 years. So all this study says is, if you go to a concert, you're going to feel better. And then it says, well, other study says if you feel better, your life get extended 9 years. That's not what the headline says.
So they're trying to apply the transitive property of equality to studies, basically. Exactly. Oh my God.
I mean, it's so anti-scientific that it's unbelievable. And
still, I think people should go to more concerts, but hey, that's just...
I don't know. I think going to more concerts actually reduces your ability to hear. You lose your voice.
Depending on the type of concert you go to.
Yeah, I mean, look at the picture they have there. These people can't hear anything, and that reduces, I think.
Wear earplugs when you go to these concerts. That's all.
These guys are not wearing earplugs. They can't even find their ears because of the long hair and the stupid hats they're wearing. But anyway, that's that study.
I've also got a link to an Instagram post of a beautiful sculpture there. But I want to ask you about this.
Wait. Hormone prescription.
Okay. I had some video playing in the background. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. So I don't know if people if they heard your video playing. So I've got a link to an Instagram post that's got different angles on this one beautiful sculpture that I saw a year ago. So it came up in my memory. So I went ahead and put that there for people's enjoyment. Go to Copenhagen, go to Carlsberg Museum, get yourself a tour that'll allow you to see this piece. It's amazing. This life-size sculpture. Okay, then
the really good kiss, much better than Rodin's kiss.
Yeah, I think so. But Rodin left so many of his things unfinished, right? You know, if he had...
No, that one's a finished piece. The kiss
that one. Okay, but some of the others, it's like...
Well, but you left them unfinished on purpose.
On purpose? All of them that are unfinished?
Not all of them. Most of them are left on purpose. Yeah.
Okay. I need to learn more then about Rodin. So here's the last thing. Sacha Baron Cohen is going to have this show on Showtime, Who is America? And there is a 10-minute clip, which I have watched the entire 10 minutes. I don't know of anybody else who's actually endured the full 10 minutes, although maybe David Cohen, who I don't think is any relation to Sacha Baron Cohen, but is the one who posted this on Facebook. Maybe he's watched the entire thing because I think he would before he posted it. So you saw a few minutes of it, Yaron?
I did. I saw 2 minutes and 23 seconds. That's what my YouTube shows.
That's what you survived through. So I watched the whole thing. What do you think of him in general? Just his technique of essentially duping people, playing this character. Some of the things he does are kind of tasteless, and he is clearly duping these people in order to get them on film saying these horrible things.
Well, the question is, is he going to do it to the left as well, right? Is he going to show, is he going to do an interview like this with some communists and some congressmen maybe saying, yeah, communism was nice. I can't say that. Is he going to do, or is he just going to focus on always making fun of the right? I would have more respect for him if he did it on the left as well. Why don't you try the video, see if it works?
Okay, let me go ahead and see if I can.
So I worry about the fact that it's so biased and so politically motivated. I think it's on the other hand, and he's also showing people at their most stupid, and he's finding the most stupid people. And my guess is he's not going to show it if they're not. And you don't know how many people he had to interview to get.
Well, so yeah, I don't know, but so let me tell people what this clip is, because you say I tell you watch 10 minutes of something, and they say, well, why should I spend 10 minutes of my time? You will be horrified at what he was able to dupe elected politicians on the right in our country to say on video. In effect, he gets a number of them, including Dana Rohrabacher. And by the way, I've met Dana Rohrabacher. He went to high school with my mom and my stepdad. Both my mom and my stepdad are not around, but if they were here, I would just shudder. It's like, what in the world would they think of this guy? Because what these politicians are all saying is that they think it would be a good idea to arm young children and train them how to use firearms so that they can be, quote, kindergartens, meaning kindergarten age kids who protect themselves from school shooters by themselves using guns.
Yes.
And there's a number of different ways in which he gets these politicians on film to endorse this idea. A couple of the arguably funny, but just most horrific ones is he gets one politician to sit there and do a so-called promotional video that's targeted at kids, showing them all these guns with like stuffed animals and here's how you use it. I mean, wow. And then there's another politician.
It does show us how stupid our politicians are.
Well, and that's the thing. So even if you'd say, okay, well, I'd have more respect for him if he would also go after the left, because we think people on the left are equally wrong in some ways. Nonetheless, is he not doing at least a good service, doing what he personally is motivated to do to expose the stupidity of some of these people on the right?
Yes, I think
they would actually endorse putting weapons in the hands of 3, 4, and 5-year-olds. Now, to be fair, he has one politician, I don't know who it is, but he has one on camera, and he's trying to get the guy to endorse this idea. And he says, you want me to say on film that I think it's a good idea.
But on film, right? Why doesn't this politician say that is the stupidest, dumbest, most infantile? And I'm sure some people said that to him, and he's not going to show that. So, I mean, to the extent that he can discredit some, and I haven't watched Walsh, who is a radio talk show host.
He's
was
on
also
there.
duped into doing this and I'd like to see his rebuttal and to see what he says about how he treated him. And I want to make sure it's honest and the way it's edited and all of that is real before I approve of what he's doing.
Right.
But one of the guys completely in the first 2 minutes, completely I mean, he wasn't
unprompted. Yeah. He said some horrible things.
He said, yeah, kids having guns, they don't have the moral qualms against using them. So this is a good thing. We should arm kids and send them into the army. I mean, that was the implication. It was like,
they can make good soldiers because they don't have any idea of right and wrong yet. Yeah.
That's child soldiers in Africa. So
I think he's also the one who said that when they're 4 years old or something, that they are not, quote, corrupted by homosexuality or fake news.
Yeah. I mean, it's good that these people are shown for what they are, but I do want to see what the counter is, what they say. Okay, I've got a question for you from David in Sweden. He says, I study philosophy in Sweden. Often feel it is a waste of time given the business state of the universities now. Reason is not tolerated. Am I wasting my time? How did Leonard manage?
Okay, you're absolutely Yeah, I was going to say, you're absolutely not wasting your time. It is valuable. I mean, well, here's the question. The question is, are you actually getting to read and study important philosophers with which we disagree during your education and have a meaningful engagement with them? So, for example, when I did my PhD at USC, there was a course that I was able to get credit for toward my PhD, where I studied Kant, and it was Kant's critique. And we were given the full context in which Kant wrote the critique, answering certain questions that were raised in Hume. And the lecture style was, I guess a lot of people thought kind of boring, but I thought it was great because the guy just sat down and explained. And then he had us paraphrase. We had to try to paraphrase chunks of the critique and send that as an assignment. So by the time we came out of this class, I actually had a moment where I understood what Kant meant by the transcendental unity of apperception. I understood, or at least I thought I did. But if you can get a course like that, or a number of courses like that, where you're studying important figures in the history of philosophy, including current contemporary philosophy, and learn about them, even if you're not able to do any of the important work that you want to do throughout your career, I don't think it's a waste of time.
If you love philosophy.
If you love philosophy, and if you want to work with philosophy in the future. The Ayn Rand Institute has on their blog, I think it's the New Ideal blog, a post about why it's important to study thinkers with whom you disagree. And maybe go read that and then, ask yourself the question, are you able to meaningfully engage with important thinkers in the course of your education? If you're not, if it's just a bunch of garbage, like each professor is just doing something off in their own little niche and you feel like you're wasting your time, then no.
Okay. One other question, and I don't want to get into this, so I'm going to give a short answer. Do you have any views on Dr. Michael Hood? So, I mean, I know you've interviewed. I'll just say
I have not interviewed
him. Michael Hood.
I have not interviewed Dr. Michael Hood.
You referred to him somewhere. Anyway, it doesn't matter.
No, Dr. HD. I mean, I have talked with him a little bit, but I've never interviewed him for a show.
I'm just going to say we disagree on Trump really fundamentally. I think he's completely and utterly and deeply wrong about Trump. He has some interesting things to say about the Trump phenomena, but even there, I think he's whitewashing it, and I think he's wrong. But beyond that, I don't know Michael well, Dr. Hood well, and I don't really have any strong views. But since the election, I've noticed that particular thing.
Yep.
All right. Good.
Fair enough. We can put off my third-party doctrine issue until the next time because it's complicated. It's these cases where decades after a case goes cold, now they are putting DNA into these genetic databases, these commercial genetic databases, and uncovering killers and stuff. It's a very complex issue, but I would like to talk about that maybe next show. Okay.
I think we talked about it once, but now there's another case.
There's another case and it keeps coming up. So we might want to dive in a little bit. Okay.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Good. Thanks, Amy. Remind everybody, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Oh, I want to tell everybody, I'm putting up a lot of my audio material up on YouTube. So things like my finance course, Defense of Financial Markets, and my explanation for the financial crisis is now up. I just put up the history of the Middle East, and I'm about to put up the history of Islamic totalitarianism, the history of jihadism, and a lot of other stuff, a lot of my lectures, old lectures that only are in audio, all of that is going up on YouTube. So go search for it. There's a lot of good stuff there and a lot of new stuff that you maybe haven't heard before. It's been on my podcast app for a long time. So you on the podcast have access to it already, but now you can have access to it on YouTube as well. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel. More importantly, I guess, support Amy and me on Patreon. You can support Amy at Amy.
It's Amy Peikoff on Patreon.
Amy Peikoff on Patreon, and Yaron Brook's show on Patreon. And we both have PayPal.me accounts, so you can support us on PayPal.me as well. And what else did I forget? Of course, Twitter and Facebook and all the normal social media stuff. Oh, of course, share. I mean, everybody tells me, oh, we loved the show. This was a good show. We enjoyed the show. But then you don't share it. The only way I believe you, the only way I can get your love right? The only way your love is meaningful right, is if you share. You got to share. And I know I'm the last person on the planet who should talk about sharing, but yeah, you should definitely press that share button on YouTube, on Facebook, and everywhere else. All right. Thanks
everybody.
I'll be back tomorrow with 2:00, same time, same place. And we'll see Amy next week.
Yeah, we're on next week. And then I think maybe we have to skip a week again or something.
Yeah, we're not going to be that. Unfortunately, I'm gone a lot of Saturdays in the next few months. But next week we're on. Cool.
Okay. Thank you.
Talk to everybody. Bye.